Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and joining us for this really, really important conversation and discussion about the dangers of social media and the dangers it poses to teens and preteens. So welcome. Thank you for being here. A few weeks ago, we did a live 2-hour presentation on teens and social media and the dangers of social media. But today, we're so excited to bring a social media expert, Collin Karchner, who will talk to us about he's an expert on social media and the dangers it poses to kids and addiction. And will talk to us about what we as parents can do to help our kids and our teens. And this is a very, very serious issue and concern for many parents. And especially now that the kids are home and they're being homeschooled and they're home due to quarantine. But of course, this issue didn't start with the quarantine. This has been going on for a long time, and parents have been struggling with this addiction with phones and online activity for years now. Last night, I was reading this book, let me show you, called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And she had a section in there that just screamed at me about the dangers of social media and just even screen time with our kids. In the chapter, Glennon was talking about her son, who was this inquisitive, bright-eyed, creative, just interested kid. And after a while, I mean, he changed after she gave him a cell phone. And she talks about how although he was so curious about learning, she noticed that he slowly started fading away. And I know a lot of you that have kids that are using social media or are on phones can relate to this, that you end up having a disconnection with your kids. So she talks about how he had the brightest eyes she'd ever seen. And then after a while, after using the smartphone, she didn't see that brightness in his eyes. So I wanted to quickly read a part of this for you so that you know why this conversation is so important and why we're doing this with you guys today. So here she says, there is so much about phones and children that parents worry about, but I find myself worrying the most when we hand our children phones and we steal their boredom from them. As a result, we're raising a generation of writers who will never start writing, artists who will never start doodling, chefs who will never make a mess of the kitchen, athletes who will never kick a ball against a wall, and musicians who will never pick up a guitar and start strumming. She goes on to say, those who made the phones are creative people. Well, she also talks about the Silicon Valley executives, how they don't allow their children to have smartphones because they don't want their kids to get high on their own supply. So she says, those who made the phones are creative people, and they want their children to become people who create and not just consume. They don't want their children searching for themselves out there, but they want them to search inside. They know that phones were designed to keep us addicted to exterior life, and that if we never dive inward, we never become who we were meant to be. She shares that her struggle with the decision to take her son's phone away, and how despite the fact that he was slowly fading away, it took her 2 years, but she ended up taking that phone away with his permission and his cooperation. He admitted that he feels controlled by his phone, and it feels like a job that he's not getting paid for. She ends the chapter by saying, brave parenting is listening to ourselves and our children. It's doing what's true and beautiful for our child, no matter how countercultural it seems. It's about how, when we know what our children need, we don't pretend not to know. So this is why we're all here today. This is why we're having this very serious conversation. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead and say hi and comment in the comment section and let us know where you're watching us from. We do have one comment here. Oh, the name of the book. It was Glennon Doyle. Let me show you. It's called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. It's her latest book. And so we're going to have time for questions. So please save your questions for the end so we make sure we get to them. We have limited time and we have a lot to talk to Collin about. So I just want to... Awesome. Hi from California. Hi, Suzanne. And watching from Eastvale, California, Rancho Cucamonga. Is there anybody watching outside of California? I'm sure there are a lot of you. So just say hi and you're welcome. And let us know. It'll be good to know who we're talking to. So quickly, before we get on, I just want to introduce myself. If you're not familiar with me, my name is Nafisa Sikandri, and I'm an integrative and holistic licensed clinical psychologist. I specialize in anxiety disorders, and I'm also a mother of a teen, so that's why I'm here. I'm the director of MH Firm Counseling and Education Center in Arizona. I'm also an author, and I'm an online creator. And I have an online course, Transform Anxiety, which this is wrong, but it's on transforminganxiety.com. I should have updated that. And I'm the co-founder of mentalhealthformuslims.com, and you guys can find me on all those sites. And then although I am a mental health professional working with teens dealing with depression and anxiety, and that's often related to social media, but I'm not coming to you today as an expert. So for that reason, we are so honored to bring Collin Karchner here from Save the Kids. Collin, let me just introduce him before I bring him in, is the founder of Save the Kids and speaks 300 to 500 times a year to schools. I mean, I'm sure before COVID he was speaking a lot more, and now he's doing it online. But he speaks to people or to schools around the country, to parents, educators, communities about the negative effects of screen time, social media, gaming, and pornography on our kids, and how to protect your kids and their mental health from this technology. He has been invited to speak at Nike, Adidas, and hundreds of schools and colleges in TEDx Salt Lake City. Utah's Attorney General Sean Reyes has said Collin is a warrior for our kids, and that he truly is. I'm also joined today by Hosai Mujadidi, who is also my cousin and co-founder of mentalhealthformuslims.com, which we formed back in 2009. Hosai is a mother of 2 boys and works extensively with the Muslim community. The goal of today's interview is to raise awareness, start a conversation, and encourage you to talk to your children about being safe online and offline. So let me bring my wonderful co-hosts here. Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
We're excited.
Yeah, very excited. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am so honored to have you both here and so looking forward to this conversation. I think we can learn so much. So Collin, first of all, I do want to say thank you. I know you're a very busy person. You have a podcast, you're online, and you're sharing and educating constantly to parents. So thank you for being here and joining us and having this important discussion with us. I did a very brief intro with you. So please tell me more about your background and what got you started on saving kids.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. So Save the Kids is a foundation that started as a movement. And I started all ironically on social media. A couple years ago, I found out that a family friend of ours who we were really close to had a daughter that when we were neighbors with them, she was like our little buddy. She was 7, 8 years old, and she was the happiest kid on the block. And she kind of became our adopted kid. And we took her everywhere we went. We took her to ice cream cones. We took her to McDonald's. And then we moved, and I lost contact with his family for about 10 years. And then I bumped into the mom 2.5 years ago at the gas station. And I was so excited because I had seen her forever. And I said, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you forever. Like, what's new? How's your daughter? Like, what is she, like 19? Like, where's she going to school? Like, how's her life? And her mom looked at me in tears, and she said that she just passed away she died from suicide. And I didn't know, I thought she was fine. I didn't realize that she was struggling so much. And as we talked in the gas station, her mom just opened up about everything she struggled with that led to this decision to end her life. And she looked at me and she said, you know what it was, Collin? She said, when she was 12 years old, I gave her a loaded gun and I didn't show her how to use it. And it took my child. And I was like, why on earth would you give your kid a gun? Like, what? And she didn't pull out a gun. She pulled this out. And she said, I gave my daughter a loaded gun and I didn't show her to use it, and it took her. And she told me a story of what happened to her daughter when she gave her smartphone when she was, like a lot of parents do, 10, 11, 12 years old. And she said, within literally weeks, I saw something change my daughter. She just started spiraling. My happy-go-lucky, like what you said about that author, same story. I saw my daughter, who was this happy, bright, vibrant child who just loved to create and be artistic and express herself, suddenly just got sucked into her phone. And she was on it all the time, and it just everything changed. And over the course of just maybe a year, just her mental health spiraled. She was in therapy for anxiety and depression. She had suicidal thoughts. And that just led her down this path where she eventually decided that she wanted to leave this earth. And I shared that with the people who are following me on social media at the time. And I, for about 2 weeks, probably got 1,000 to 2,000 messages per day from other kids, from teenagers, all saying the same thing, saying, you think that's only happening to your friend? That's happening to me. That was happening to my brother, and he's gone now. That was happening to my sister, my friends. I had football coaches chiming in saying my whole team's struggling. I had dance coaches. I had church leaders. I had just celebrities, athletes were messaging me saying, this is happening to my kid. And I was just sharing their stories, and it just blew up and it was all over the news. And it started this huge kind of conversation where everyone finally started talking like, wait a second, maybe this technology, social media that we all use as adults, like our kids are on this now and it's affecting their mental health so bad. And the point is it wasn't just me sharing my opinion. I was sharing these kids' stories. And then from there, I said, you know what, we need to start a movement. I'm going to just do it if no one else wants to. I'm going to call it Save the Kids. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been speaking anywhere from 30 to 90 times a month at schools and communities across America. I post a lot of stuff on my Instagram account because I think we should fight fire with fire, and just really trying to wake everyone up to what this is doing to our kids. There's obviously a lot of good stuff that this technology has done for our kids and for our families, but as far as the cons are far outweighing the pros with technology and with social media and gaming, especially for our boys and girls. And so I've just been on a mission to just educate. And I'm not like, my awesome host here. I don't have a degree I'm not a therapist. I'm not a PhD. I'm just a dad with 4 kids who has a really loud mouth, who really cares about these kids. And so that's what I do with COVID. Now I decided to start podcasting, and I'm like, maybe some people are listening. And it's the number 2 parenting podcasting in America. And so I talk to experts. And then what I love doing is I have high school kids come into my studio and we do teen talk, where I just say, all right, let's talk about being a high schooler today. Like, what are kids using Snapchat for? And they're like, oh, here's what's really going on. And some of those are very, very eye-opening stuff. But I just, like you guys, I care about our kids. I care about my kids. I care about the world that they're growing up in. I see it going downhill very quickly. And if we parents are afraid to talk about this, our kids are going to be thrown to the wolves. And so I'm here to hopefully, have and do it in a fun way. I'm not here to shame anyone at all, because I messed up. We've all made mistakes as parents, but to say, hey, let's all figure this out together, and let's help our kids.
Wow, your story just gave me chills and got me teary-eyed. It's just amazing that this is happening. And like Shanila, it's just like, wow. And Fiona's saying, thank you for doing this. Definitely. And so I'm so excited to have this conversation and educate. I'm here to learn. I'm not, like I said, I do work with kids and I hear it from them, but I don't have the background and the information that you're going to share. And I know that kids are spending more and more time right now in quarantine, and they're spending more time online, and parents don't know what to do. And as a mental health professional, I know that there's a negative impact with the kids and having in terms of anxiety and depression, but you have so much more to add to that. Can you talk about the mental health impact that this is having on our kids?
If we look at the rate of youth suicide, I'm talking kids 10 to 17. Since smartphones came out in 2007, the rate of teen suicide has tripled in the US. Suicide is now the leading cause of death for kids 10 to 17 in most every state in the country. Last year, there were some surveys that went out, and since we have a lot of people in California, 1 out of 5 high schoolers in the state of California said they've considered suicide. 1 out of 4 high schoolers in Utah, where I live, said they've considered suicide. There is a alarming trend, and it all happened. I mean, if you look at the graphs, everything was pretty flat, and then smartphones and social media came out, and it just skyrocketed. And so there is absolutely a direct tie between mental health, anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide ideation, and suicide, and the amount of time kids are spending on social media. And so obviously we could talk about how great, there's a lot of kids I met who've used social media to do amazing things. And I think there's a great place for these apps in these high schoolers' life. If they're using it to promote themselves, if they're using it to promote their skills, or they're using it to create or to inspire others. I think one thing about this young generation is they're so amazing at creating movements and about sparking change. And social media has been a great platform for a lot of these kids. But this isn't the conversation about why social media is amazing for kids. There's a few reasons why it's okay. But as far as the younger kids kids are very resilient, and I think we need to give them credit for that. Especially during things like COVID and pandemics. I think if anyone's handling it the best, it's the kids are doing a lot better than most of us parents. At least my kids are doing way better than I am. And so let's realize that they are very resilient, but also realize that they are wired to make a lot of stupid decisions. And so if we hand kids apps that most adults, right, most adults can't handle, apps like Instagram or Snapchat and now TikTok, most adults can't handle these. If we hand these to kids whose brains are so underdeveloped just because of how they're wired, they're going to make a lot of mistakes. And so we should expect it. I always use the example that we're giving kids keys to their car without any driver's ed at all. And not when they're 16, when they're 9. And we're saying, hey, here's the family keys to the car. Like, I'm not going to teach you. Good luck. And then they crash the car and all the parents look at each other and freak out. They're like, how is my kid crashing? Like, why? Of course they're going to crash. And so we need to understand that they're not wired to make good decisions. Kids are wired to make very dumb choices. They're wired for high risk. The part of their brain that's in charge of making good decisions and logic and impulse control and all those things isn't going to be developed till they're like mid-20s. And so parents have to be the brakes. You can't just hand your kids keys to these apps and think they're going to be okay. They're not going to be okay for the most part. We have to be their brakes and have to be over their shoulder and be monitoring what they're doing. And most importantly, leading by example. Right now, as far as the schools I go to, and I've traveled to schools all across the country. And a lot of parents ask, they say, is this specific to certain socioeconomic groups? Is this specific to certain areas of the country? Is it just urban or is it more rural? I have spoke at the richest high school in the country and in the same month spoke at the poorest middle school in the country. It is the same problems. It doesn't matter if parents make a lot of money and they're in a very high socioeconomic bracket or rural areas with parents that aren't around, the kids are struggling with the same issues. And the mental health, it doesn't matter either. As we look across the nation, what I see from my research is places that are very affluent, where there's a lot of pressure on kids to succeed, and parents are really sucked into the Facebook game and social media game of like, here's my perfect life and my kids are perfect. And we all know we have friends that are like that. Some of us are like that too. The rate of anxiety, depression, and suicide in those areas is usually the highest. At a high school about 30 minutes from my house 2 years ago, we had 18 suicides in one school year. And these are good kids. These are kids. I talked to most of their parents. They're, both parents are around. The parents care about their kids. They just aren't keeping on top of things. And so if we want to protect our kids' mental health, I'm not saying that phones are the only culprit. I'm not saying that if you pull your kid's phone away, that it's going to save their mental health overnight. But if your kid's struggling with anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, before you throw them on meds and throw them into therapy right away, I would look first at screen time and see what can we do there. Because there's a lot of things you can do that can really help your kids with their mental health, which we can, of course, talk about. But I feel like I'm rambling. So that's my...
Oh, that was perfect. Thank you. I mean, and I know social media sometimes glorifies suicide and cutting and self-harming behaviors. I know that I'm very ignorant when it comes to all the apps. I thought Snapchat was just for filters. That's all I use it for. I have no idea what else that people use it for, but I know that it's dangerous. And TikTok is something that I have no knowledge of at all. So for ignorant parents like me, can you tell us about some of these really, really dangerous and popular apps that kids are on that we have no idea what the consequences are?
Absolutely. Get your pens ready. I'm going to give you a list of a few. So if you go to the App Store, there is a billion apps. And if you look at all of them, you're going to give up and it's going to be too overwhelming. And so don't just go through every single one of them and research them all. There are ones that the kids all use, which we'll talk about for a second. There are ones that kids know of, and some of them might have on your that they actually might have on their iPad or on their phone that you don't realize are harmful. There are ones that we absolutely we need to burn these apps to the ground. I don't have any idea how Apple even lets these apps on the App Store. And so I'll talk about a few of those, but I'll hammer the main ones that your kids use and what the issues are of those. So the ones that any app where it allows strangers to chat with them should be an absolute deal breaker. So apps like TikTok, where they can chat with strangers and strangers can message or comment them. Now you can set it to private, But then you have to be very vigilant and diligent onto checking who's actually talking to you or who's following your kid. So your kid can have a private Instagram account, but just realize that, you need to make sure who they're adding as followers. A lot of really creepy pedophiles will create fake accounts that have a photo of a high school kid and a name of a high school kid. And then they start talking to them and your parents like, oh, it just might be a kid. It's no big deal. So there are apps, any app. I have 4 kids. My oldest is in 9th grade. Any app where they can chat with strangers privately is an absolute deal breaker. Some of the worst ones. There's an app called Omegle. Omegle is an app where you can video chat with anyone, and Omegle pairs you with just random people. This app is an absolute disaster. So if your kids have Omegle or they've asked you about it, that is a horrible one. Maybe the biggest messaging app that predators are using to message kids is called Kik, K-I-K. A lot of times predators will go after your kids on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, or a game. And then they'll ask the kid, hey, why don't you go download Kik? And then we can talk there. The reason why they do that is because we can't subpoena Kik. Kik is offshore. And so if there is problems and your kid gets extorted, which we'll talk about, if they're using Kik, then it's really hard for us to get those guys to bust those people. There's some other apps like Yubo. Yubo is an app a lot of kids use where they can chat with friends. It's called an app where you can meet new Snapchat friends. Yubo is a horrible app. Another app that a lot of kids use, which works with Snapchat, is called Hoop. And Hoop is basically Tinder for teenagers. I don't know why these apps exist. But Hoop is an app that kids, if they have Snapchat, they can use too, where they can just find people where they can online date. All it is just a way that kids can send nude photos back and forth. There's a lot of other ones. There's one called Live Me. There's one called Grindr, Bumble, Yellow. There's a bunch of those. Most of your kids know what those are. Some of your kids use those ones. So make sure you burn those off their phones and talk to them about why. The main apps that your kids are using, though, especially if they're like 9 to 17, number 1 is going to be Snapchat. 2 is going to be TikTok. Then there's going to be Instagram, Twitter. A lot of kids use all those ones. And so what I want to talk about is just stuff you need to look out for. So let's talk about Instagram first. So Instagram, of course, was a fun app when it came out, and now it's kind of a disaster, especially now they have this new thing called Reels, which came out last week, which is now basically they turned it into TikTok Junior. Instagram is a great app for your kids if they want to be creative, if they want to showcase their art or they want to showcase their talent. I've met high school kids that have got football scholarships because of Instagram. They've been in little cities where no scouting coaches from colleges would come, but they post their highlights from football games, and then they tag schools, and the schools actually get to know them, and they're like, oh, this is actually a good way to find kids, for college scholarships and things like that. If your kid has Instagram, they have something called a Finsta or a spam account. A Finsta is a fake Instagram account, and every kid has one. If they have Instagram, they've got a Finsta. Their Instagram account is the one that parents can see and that neighbors can see, and their public one, and that's usually the one where they showcase the best part of their lives, very curated, to look really good. But kids want a place where they can be silly and they can be dumb. So a lot of them will have a Finsta account or they call it a spam account. Instagram lets you have 5 accounts. And most of the times those kids use them as just a funny way to share memes with friends. They usually only let a few friends follow them on that. But a lot of times kids are using those to hide what they don't want mom and dad to see. And so how do you talk to your kids about it? If they have Instagram, just have the conversation at dinner. Hey, how's your Instagram going? Oh, good. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. What's a Finsta? And and you have one. Don't even ask if they have one. Just of course you've got one. So what do you usually post on your Finsta? Be prepared. If your kid, especially a high schooler, has Finsta accounts that you find out about that you didn't know about, be prepared to see stuff that might shock you. Remember this: kids are wired to be dumb and make dumb decisions and be very, very high risk without thinking of consequences. And if we gave them a platform where they can be silly and they can hide it from the world, a lot of times you'll see Finstas of your kids or their friends posting very, very vulgar stuff, very, very high, maybe promiscuous stuff, photos of them vaping with friends where they might not even be vaping. There might be some partial nudity, stuff like that. And we'll talk about what do you say to your kids when you find that stuff. Am I doing okay? Should I keep going? Are we good?
You're doing great.
Yeah, you're great.
So do I like Instagram? Yes. The other reason I don't like it, though, besides especially for kids, in 2018, Instagram was the #1 platform kids were exposed to pornography as far as social media.
Wow.
Instagram has a no nudity clause in their privacy section, but every single day I can type in hashtags where I can find actual pornography. And if it's not straight up hardcore pornography, it's very close. Most kids today aren't being exposed to pornography on the hardcore porn sites. They're finding it first through apps like Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok. And then that sparks their curiosity because that's how kids are wired, to be curious. And if parents aren't talking to them about pornography, they are going to hire Instagram or porn sites to teach them about pornography. And so Instagram's a bad one for that. TikTok's a bad one for that. Snapchat is the worst one for this. Twitter, they can find pornography in all those sites, on all those apps. And so Instagram, yeah. If your kid has it, talk to them about it. Make sure their accounts are private. Please don't let them have public accounts unless they're older teenagers looking to get into college and they need to start kind of, getting on radars of college, admissions offices and things like that. So just be careful there. Snapchat is the absolute worst app ever created. I know this is recorded. I want to make sure everyone understood me when I said that. The absolute worst app ever made in the history of ever. But every kid uses it, especially if they're in middle school. Snapchat for a lot of kids is just the way they talk to each other. If you go to a school today, a middle school or high school, a lot of these kids don't even have their friends' phone numbers. And if you ask them, hey, why don't you just get your friend's phone number and text? They'll tell me, they'll say, well, I'm embarrassed to ask my friend for their phone number. I just say, hey, what's your snap? Snap me. And so most of the kids are using it just to talk to each other. Yeah, it's got the funny filters like we just talked about. The funny filters are there to convince parents that look at it for a second that it's okay. They're just, oh, it's just silly filters. You got a dog tongue or the little mask thing or the whatever puking rainbow guts. That's just a way to con parents into thinking this is okay for kids. Mm-hmm. Snapchat, if you go through and every single day I search articles of how predators are finding kids and then extorting them for nude photos or for money. Almost every single time it's through Snapchat. Kids are very, very curious and very low risk. And if they have their phone in their bedroom at night and they're bored and they're looking for a thrill and someone on Snapchat messages them and says, hey, I'm a boy in your area and I just thought you look really cute. I wanted to talk to you. It's pretty hard for kids to not engage with that person thinking that they're just a teenager their age. And then what happens a lot of times is then they will start a conversation with someone on Snapchat that they think is a friend their age or someone in their city their age. And it's really an older predator looking to extort this kid. Back and forth conversations. Mom and dad don't know about it, because the photos can disappear. And then what happens is the person says, hey, here's a picture of me. They send a picture to your kid that looks like, someone maybe in their underwear. And they say, why don't you send me one of you? And kids will give in, even if your kids are great kids, right? Because again, that's how their brains are wired. That's called sexting, and it's happening usually starting around 6th, 7th grade in most schools, where they're either sexting friends through Snapchat or people they think are kids their age, and they're not. The issues with this are obviously a lot of issues, but with the predators and how they're going after your kids is they start those conversations, and then your kid sends them a photo of them in their underwear, and then it goes back and forth to less and less clothes. Finally, a kid gives in and sends an actual full nude photo. The predators then screenshot those and save them, and then they start demanding money. They either say, I have all your photos and videos you've sent me. I'm going to expose these to your friend list on Snapchat or Instagram. I'm going to expose these to your parents unless you give me money or you keep sending me photos. This is happening every day all over the place. And if you don't think it can happen to your kid, every parent I've talked to in tears that has happened to their kid said the same thing. I had no clue that this would happen to my kid. A lot of kids I talk to have very good families and parents who are really engaged, and it still happens. And I don't blame the kids for this at all. We gave them technology that is meant for adults, and they're kids with brains that aren't wired for this stuff yet. And the people on the other side of Snapchat are very, very, very good at manipulating kids into getting what they want. If you've noticed your kid really retreating into the bedroom, if you've noticed a big change in their personality, if you've noticed them constantly on their phone, constantly worried, every time it buzzes, they pull it out, and you say, hey, is that a friend? Like, no, don't talk to me about it. Those are all red flags for something happening like this. And so we'll talk about how do you talk to your kids about that. Snapchat, I wish was never invented, but most of the kids use it. It's very, very addictive. A lot of kids, when I go to middle schools, I'll say, how many of you have Snapchat? And every hand will go up. And I'll say, how many of you have a streak going with someone? Snapchat streaks, if you don't know what those are, Snapchat created a way to make kids almost force them to use their app more, where they message a friend or send a photo to a friend back and forth at least once or twice a day. Then it gives them a notch and they have a streak with that person. So how many consecutive days are they talking to them? Snapchat did that as a way to fake kids into thinking they're actually creating relationships that are meaningful and deep. And this absolutely is not doing that. That just gets kids to open the app more. I ask kids, how many of you have Snapchat? Every hand goes up. How many of you are engaged in a streak of some sort with people? Some kids have streaks at like 400, 500, 600 days. I met a kid in high school had a streak with someone that was over 1,000 days. I'm like, you've spent like 3.5 years of your life messaging this person at least once a day. And she's like, I don't even know who he is. I'm like, oh, geez. And if you ask the kids, how many of you actually like Snapchat and like streaks? Like every hand goes down. Most of the kids don't even like this stuff. It's they just feel like they have to use it. And so those are the apps. And then let's go to TikTok. If your kid has TikTok, yes, you can set up private settings. So your kid can have an account that's private so they can still do the funny dances that look like they're summoning some demon or like, fighting invisible bees. But for the most part, TikTok is another disaster. And I'm just going to share briefly why I think it's a disaster. Instagram was the worst thing for girls. And then TikTok came around and it's even worse than Instagram for girls, especially. I have 3 daughters and a son, my 3 daughters. And I think about what this world is doing to our girls and just hyper sexualizing girls. And when they get on these apps, if you go to TikTok, and I would suggest if your kid has TikTok, please download it, put on your phone and just scroll through the For You page so you can see what your kids are seeing. And every third video is a very skinny person wearing hardly any clothes. And all the dances are very, very sexual. And what they do is the girls then mimic those and post the videos of them doing their little dance routine or their lip sync. You would be shocked how many of little kids that are your kids or your friends' kids that are lip syncing and dancing to the most vile lyrics you've ever heard in your life. F words, N words, P words. And a lot of times the kids don't even realize they're doing it or what the words mean. Dancing, pulling their shirts up, crop tops, because again, that's what TikTok promotes. So I've had a lot of girls message me. And if you go to my Instagram account, you can go to the highlight stories. There's about 4 just on TikTok. Please look at those because it's not just what's on there, but what kids are telling me. Girls messaged me saying that when I got TikTok, I instantly started hating myself and everything about myself, how I looked. I felt fat. I felt gross because everyone on there is so skinny and pretty and perfect because that's who TikTok promotes and lets them go viral. I've had a lot of girls tell me that they've got eating disorders created because of TikTok. I had a dad message me and said that we just stopped our 12-year-old daughter from committing suicide. And as she was bawling on the couch and we said, what happened? She said she had been starving herself to look skinnier like the girls she sees on TikTok, and she was in 6th grade. And so I think TikTok, if you can have an account with your kids and it's private and you're monitoring it and they're just using it for the funny dances and just for their friends, that's the least worst possible situation. But just realize that TikTok is also full of a lot of really gross predators and pedophiles that just love to watch. I mean, this is like their Disney World. A whole bunch of young kids wearing hardly any clothes, dancing like strippers in front of a camera. Like they're just lined up watching this. And so I always tell kids that I'm like, hey, I know you love dancing on TikTok and you want to get likes and you want to get the dopamine, but you also know that a lot of your audience is just like creepy old dudes. Like, that's hopefully wake them up a little bit. So how do you talk to your kids about these if they have these apps? I always tell parents, if your kids have had these apps for a while, it is really hard to take them away and just cold turkey rip them out of their hands. And I would not suggest doing that ever, especially if your kid has had it for a while and they're very addicted to these apps. If you yank it away and just say, I just learned a bunch of stuff from this guy in Utah, give me your phone and chuck it in the garbage can. Do not do that. A lot of your kids are not just going to be mad about that, which is okay for them to get mad. But we've seen a lot of kids who have literally hurt themselves or attempted suicide or died from suicide just because mom took their phone away. So what we need to do is just have conversations. talk to your kids about these apps, sit down with them and scroll through TikTok with them, scroll through Snapchat and ask them, hey, what do you think about this? How does this app make you feel? When you see someone dancing like that, like, how does that make you feel? What are you thinking about this? I ask the kids, what would you change? What do you think they should change about these apps? How do you feel about this? Just have these courageous conversations, because when we don't talk about these apps and all their friends are hearing about them and they're hearing about them and they want to use them and they beg you for them, if you don't talk about them, that almost makes kids more curious. And then they want to go learn about it. And then they learn about it from their friends, or they learn about it from people on those apps. And that is who you don't want to teach your kids. You do not want Kim Kardashian to teach your daughter about body image on Instagram. You don't want these TikTok famous girls that wear Harlini clothes to teach your girls about body image on TikTok. You want to be the one that has those conversations with your kids. There's a ton of other apps out there too. We could talk about some of those. Just realize that if your kid, Pinterest is what a lot of girls like and like to use. There's pornography on Pinterest, so just be aware of that. If your kid's like, hey, I'm gonna go in my room and go scroll Pinterest for a while, maybe get them on the couch or in the kitchen, so you can be there to help monitor. If your kid's a big gamer, one of the big gaming apps for kids to talk to each other is called Discord, and just realize that chatting with strangers, a lot of negativity is going to come out, a lot of cyberbullying on apps like that. Anyways, there's just too many. There's so many apps I feel like I could talk about for hours, but those are the main ones. So.
Wow,
Collin,
my
that
mind
was absolutely amazing. No, really, you were so enlightening.
Like, oh, there's too many, but just the ones that your kids use, again, if they can talk to strangers, those are the ones that you need to be really concerned about. And the ones where they're dancing or, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, those are the big three ones we got issues with.
Thank you so much, Collin, for shedding so much light. I know just watching the comments, I'm getting private messages from people who are blown away by what you're sharing with all of us. You brought up the Finsta account, and I'm sure you know about vault accounts. I've discussed them in previous things that I've done. Yeah. Can you share maybe after speaking to some of the youth, because I know you work a lot with youth, what are the blind spots that parents have about social media that youth have been able to share with you? Because I feel like a lot of times in the Muslim community anyhow, maybe because technology is very alluring, I'm in the Silicon Valley where everything is tech, STEM. There's a lot of push towards those things. So a lot of parents assume that it's benign because, this is the world we're in, it's technology, it's not a big deal. Or they have the other problem where, as you said, maybe because, certain family values and cultural values or religious values are in place, that they may think, not my kids, right? My kids wouldn't do that. So can you maybe share what you've heard from youth in terms of how parents can, the blind spots that they've had with their parents?
I get a lot of messages from high school kids, or either through direct message, or if they talk to me after assemblies, and they say, if my parents had any idea what I'm doing on my phone, they would lose their minds. Understand that your kids, even they're really, really good at hiding stuff from you. If they're involved in social media and it's a big part of their life, they're being exposed to all this stuff. A lot of kids are doing all the things, and realize that that's kind of what we would all do too. I always tell parents, like, we need to stop shaming our kids from being stupid on Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram, because let's be honest, like, if all of us parents had these apps when we were in high school, if we all had smartphones, if I had Snapchat in high school, like I joke with my buddies, I'm like, most of us would probably be in jail if we had these apps in high school. And so realize that, that the kids, no matter how awesome they are, they're still kids, and they're going to mess up, and they're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. We want them to make those mistakes, but we want them to make those mistakes under our roof, where we can jump in and where we can mentor and where we can guide them. That's where we want the mistakes to be made. But some of the big blind spots are, number one, thinking that your kid, that this isn't going to happen to your kid. Those are some of the two big excuses I hear from parents, which are, this is just the way things are. This is just the world they're growing up in, and you just have to give it to them and hope they make good decisions. Or number two, like, it's not going to happen to my kid. Those excuses have to be thrown out forever, because those don't exist. Those are just lazy parenting excuses that make us feel good. They are happening to a lot of your kids, and don't freak out. even if they're amazing kids and you've worked really hard to parent and to raise them, when you find out they've messed up, or when you find out because you found their Finsta or you saw that they have a whole folder of nude photos of girls from school, please, please, please don't freak out. Please don't start screaming and yelling. All that teaches kids, and this is from their own mouth. When my parents found out I messed up and they yelled at me, all it teaches them is that A, they can't talk to you about this ever again. And B, they just need to hide it better. That's all you've done by freaking out. What is a good reaction? A good reaction when you find this out is to grab your son or daughter and just lean in and give them a big hug and say, I am so, so proud of you for telling me. Or, if they do tell you. And if they didn't tell you found out, is just to be very calm and to look at them and give them a hug and say, listen, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm not embarrassed by you. It's okay. I've made mistakes. I make mistakes too. I'd have made plenty of mistakes like this when I was your age too. But let's talk about how we can handle this. Because I'm in your corner. If you go at it with that, as opposed to guns blaring and screaming and Consequence City and throwing them into a boarding school in Switzerland, you're going to lose your kid. They need to know that you're on their side. Yes, there needs to be consequences. Yes, there needs to be boundaries. That's the other thing. Like, kids in charge are not happy kids. And you think that you want to let them be in charge of everything, and they act like if they're in charge and they can make all the decisions that they're going to be happier, but they're not. We need to guide them with good, healthy boundaries. But that's probably the biggest blind spot, is thinking it's not going to happen to your kid, or thinking that there's nothing you can do because this is the way they are, or everyone else's parents give their kids this stuff, so we just have to. Leonard Sachs, who you mentioned, who wrote a lot of amazing books, Boys Adrift, and he wrote the Collapse of Parenting. One of my favorite quotes he said is that parents today, you have to do things different than all the other parents if you want to keep your kids safe. We have to do things different. My 4 kids, we went screen-free 2.5 years ago. We threw away iPads, Kindles, Xbox, Wii, PS4, iPads. And we have one TV where they can watch, Disney Plus and things like that. My daughter, who's going to 9th grade, doesn't have a phone, has no social media, and we are definitely the minority. But I have to do it. We just have to be different than everyone else's. I always say it's kind of like cigarettes 2.0. I mean, people were smoking and their kids were smoking for 75 years before the Surgeon General labels came out and said, wait a second, these things that you hold in your hand are actually really bad for you. And a lot of people died and were guinea pigs. And so there's a lot of other things with blind spots, though. Understand that your kids, a lot of times, if you don't think they have a phone, they might have one that you don't even know about. A lot of high school kids, if you take their phone away, their friends at school give them a phone, or they call it a burner phone. They just leave, or they hide in their bedroom. Kids that want to be online, that are addicted to the dopamine rush and talking to their friends, are going to find a way. I had a mom come up to me after a parent night, and she said, I took my son's phone away, and then one night I heard someone in the kitchen. I walked in there, and he found an old phone, and he got on the hotspot in the smart fridge, and he had the fridge door open, and he was inside it, and he was on Twitter. Kids are ninjas. They're going to find a way. And so understanding that, and then there's also a lot of apps out there. There's apps where they can hide stuff. There, like you said, vault accounts. Someone made an app that looks like a calculator that kids download, put on their phone, that if it works like a calculator, and I have it on my phone too. And if you type in a code, it'll open up a whole new interface where then they can hide all their files. They can hide the apps they don't want you to see. They can put all the photos that are the, explicit photos they don't want mom to see. That's a whole nother conversation. I need to run out to Silicon Valley, where Hosai lives, and go yell at some people.
Wow. I've learned so much in such a short amount of time. That's insane. And a lot of people are feeling guilty about taking that, like even in the book Untamed with Glennon Doyle, she was talking about how parents are feeling guilty of taking the social media away from them. And why not let our kids be like everybody else? All the other parents are doing it, and I don't want my kid to feel different. Or what am I going to do when they're home all the time and I can't entertain them? So what else should I do? So what do you say to those parents, and what strategies can you give them as an alternative to streaming and social media and screen time?
So realize that parenting takes work, and as busy as we are, and I know it's a really hard time to be a parent. I'm a parent. My wife, she works, I work, and it's hard to entertain your kids. But realize that kids thrive when they're bored. When you mentioned that quote from the beginning from that book, which I've read, I love, And she said that we are going to lose. How many kids are not going to be, guitarists and creatives and leaders and come up with these ideas because we gave them screens when they were babies, and that took away all their desire to go entertain themselves. One of the best things about us when we went totally screen free a couple 2.5 years ago is watching my kids for the first 2 days act like total hellions. Like I just took their favorite drug away and they were bouncing off the walls and they were threatening to sue me. My 6-year-old's like, I'm going to sue you for taking away the iPad, which was kind of funny. But after a day or two of like them finally coming off and the withdrawals were gone, watching them sit at a table and play Monopoly for 4 hours, or watching them grab a box of just garbage and turning it into this amazing like scenery or building a fort or going outside. After 2 days, they didn't ask for the screens ever again. And we talk about that. We have those conversations. I'm not saying you got to go full Amish like we did and just go full screen free. Of course they use the technology in schools. They use the iPads at school. They use the Chromebooks at school, which is fine. But at home, we don't do screens because we want our kids to have to be bored. And when they complain, all my friends play Fortnite for 10 hours a day, or all my friends are on TikTok 10 hours a day. I just, if they'd said that to me, I would just give them a big hug and a kiss. I say, that's so sweet. It's too bad you weren't born in their family. But here you're going to go outside and go play some games. Right. And just laugh with them and love them. I think if I can, and I haven't mentioned this yet, the biggest issue with all of this is not a technology issue. This is not a video game issue. This is not a TikTok issue. The issue is the family. And the issue is parenting. All the issues that our kids are facing are either because they're not feeling connection at home, or they're not being seen and heard and loved, and they're not getting it at home. And they're not getting in the house. One of the saddest messages I get from kids is after assemblies when they say, how do I get my parents off their phones? Like, I look at my phone all the time because when I go home from school, like my mom and dad are on their iPads or their phones like all night. Like we don't even have, if we go to a restaurant, like everyone's on their phone together. If we go out to anything, like no one even talks to each other. Those are the most heartbreaking messages. And so I think if anything, like what would I do first after you leave this live stream would be, don't even touch your kids' devices right now. I would say don't even do anything for a week or so. Like just let this soak in. And first, if anything, as parents, look at your own screen time and your own digital behaviors and see where we as parents could do better. Your daughter is not going to get off her smartphone if she's 16 at home or at the dinner table if we as parents aren't doing that. And we have to set better examples because kids see us, they don't hear us. And so, there's so much we could talk about, but I would say, if anything, go home and set a goal as a family and say, hey, mom and dad, we realize that we're on our phones a lot around you. A lot of times we're working, but you don't know that. And so what we're going to do is every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 5 to 9, we're going to put the phones away. And we want you to do that too. We're going to get a basket, put it by the door, and we're going to just have family dinner and talk to each other. And the first one will be awkward, where you're all looking at each other with crickets chirping, like, how do we have a conversation? I forgot how to do this, right? But you'll realize quickly that your kids don't want to be little screen junkies. They don't want this. I see these memes that float on Facebook where parents share them like, I'm so glad I grew up like this and not this. And like this photo is, all these kids at a park, playing on swings. And the other photo is, and not this, of kids, a bunch of girls looking at their phones together, taking selfies. And I hate those memes because kids did not ask for this. And they didn't want to be little screen junkies. They didn't want to be playing an iPad all day long. They're doing it because it's fun and it's very addictive. And that's where we're losing our kids. And that's why Silicon Valley executives all have 5 super yachts. That's why, games like Fortnite, which are free, make $2 billion a quarter, because they found a way to say, hey, if parents don't want to entertain their kids, we'll take over and we're not going to let go of your kid and we're going to make a lot of money off it. But first, if anything, parents, we've got to set a better example with our screen behavior. So
I love what you said, that they see us, they don't hear us. And that's so important for us to focus on.
So I have a question quickly, Collin, about, because you had mentioned earlier that Instagram was the threat for girls. And I think this is really important because, families, whether they have one child, different children, blended families, I think they need to be very well aware of the different threats that are out there that are based on, the age, obviously, of their children, also the gender, and how these platforms are designed to pull in different demographics in a different way. For example, as you said, Instagram is very toxic for girls more so, and the research reflects that as well. That when it comes to social media, you see a lot of girls falling into these dangerous behaviors, whereas for boys, the other threat is, of course, video games. And I've found, and my challenge working with the Muslim community is that they see that as the only alternative. Like, okay, fine, if my kids aren't on social media, or I've set boundaries with them being on social media, they need to have fun. And again, we're back to that question about how to preoccupy them when they're bored. And so they don't oftentimes make the connections that even video games have dangers inherent to them. And I know from watching some of your content, as well as things that I've read, things that look very benign again for young children, like Roblox, right? There's features on there. And then you just mentioned Fortnite. Can you please speak a little bit about maybe parents who have boys and some of the behaviors that they need to look out for as well?
So I love boys. I think my favorite human being on the planet is like 14, 15-year-old boys, because they just say and do the funniest stuff. I have looked at video games taking over, or especially over the last 5 years. And one thing I've realized is part of the reason why it's taking over, especially boys' lives, is because we as society and we as parents took away everything that boys love. We teach boys differently in school than how boys want to be taught. We took away their, you hear a lot about us 80s and 90s kids. When we were kids, we came home from school and we just left the house, and our parents had no clue what we were doing. And they just said, come home when the sun comes down, or come home when the light post turns on, or come home when dad puts those big sausage fingers in his mouth and whistles, and then you just drop your stuff and run home. We took away the things that boys really thrive with. Boys, what do they want to do? They want to collaborate with peers. They want to level up. They want to succeed. They want to kill bad guys. They want to run around. They want to have freedom. And they want to be able to move objects through space and time. And so boys thrive differently than girls. And that's why I always say that social media, especially like the Instagrams and TikToks, are really affecting girls more than boys. I mean, of course, it affects both. But the reason why video games are doing so well, and why your son doesn't want to put down Minecraft and doesn't want to put down Roblox or Fortnite, is because they're giving these kids, especially the boys, the things that they want, that they thrive with. Why is Fortnite so amazing? Because a boy can play Fortnite and he is a part of a group, and they all have this one common goal, and they have to play together and fight and strategize. And he gets to move objects through space and time, and he gets to win and all this stuff. And he gets to get on his headphones and talk to people. That's the other thing about Fortnite and the games. Just understand that games like Fortnite and any game where kids can talk to each other, that is social media for boys. Fortnite is 100% social media. If your boys play some of these video games, they have their headphones on. A lot of times these boys aren't even they're just talking to each other. They got their buddies, because parents don't let them play in person anymore, or go out and, just run around the neighborhood. So they put their headphones on, and a lot of times boys, they'll be like, hey, how was school? Like, what are you talking about? They just kind of just chat with each other. I've seen boys like take out their earbuds, be like, hey, what do you listen to? And they'll put their earbud on the microphone and everyone listens and stuff. It's kind of just like the shopping mall now, just a hangout place. So of course boys are going to the video games because the games are giving them what we took away from them. Here's the issues with the games. And I've had boys on my podcast, high schoolers that came on, that have said this word for word. They've said, when I was playing games like Fortnite or Clash, where I'm talking to people, I felt a responsibility to my clan. I felt a responsibility to keep playing. You can't pause Fortnite, right? And so, your boy's playing a game and he's halfway through it, and you say, hey, it's dinner time. And then you say, I'm going to pull the plug, and he loses his mind. And you're like, what's wrong with my kid? Why would he act like that? I mean, I played Tetris growing up. I never did that. They have built these games to be so addictive to boys because they know how boys work. Fortnite was created by a guy right here in Utah, and their team is filled with child psychologists and filled with neuroaddiction experts. And they sit side by side with these developers, and they say, hey, if you change the color of this to that, it's going to trigger more dopamine. If you change this reward to make this sound when they get it and not this, it's going to trigger more dopamine. If you change it where they can't pause the game, the boys are going to want to play longer, and then we're going to make more money. There's an entire army of experts on the other side of your kid's little iPad with Minecraft, with Roblox especially, that are so good at keeping kids to come back, what you see is your kid being entertained isn't an entertainment. It's literally an addiction. It is dumping copious amounts of dopamine on your boy or girl's brain, keeping them engaged, keeping their heart rate really high, keeping them in the very deep part of the brainstem where they're like in a constant fight or flight mode. And if you don't believe me, turn off Fortnite when they're halfway through and watch them just go berserk. If you put a heart rate monitor and a blood pressure cuff on a teenage kid or a kid playing any of those games, you would be shocked at the levels those kids are playing at. And the thing about the brain, especially for a kid, is that the brain doesn't realize that this dopamine I'm getting from Fortnite or from Roblox is different dopamine than you get from cocaine or heroin. The brain doesn't know the difference. It's just straight dopamine. And so the issues that we're seeing with boys is falling into the video game world is that suddenly they stop doing the things they love outside of the video game world. Suddenly all the hobbies and playing basketball or, playing with a Rubik's Cube or playing chess, those all go away because they're not as amazing fun as the video games are. But the issue with any type of drug or any type of dopamine chemical is the more dopamine that brain is being dumped, the less dopamine their brains make as a kid. And then what happens is when they get off the games, you see them crash, right? You see them get really aggressive, or you see them just get really, really angsty and really irritable. And parents freak out, like, what's wrong with my kid? And I always tell them, that's not your kid at all. That's the video game. That's what the game did to the kid. And so I think video games, I think they're great. I think they're fun. I tell parents, if your boy especially loves gaming, sit down, moms too, sit down and play with them, put on the headset to ask them to teach you about Fortnite, ask them to teach you about Roblox. That's a great way to connect with your kid, but there has to be moderation. If your kid's playing for an hour or two on the weekends, no problem. If they've done their chores and they're hitting all the other goals that you set for them, hey, if you're being respectful, you're hitting your chores, you're doing this, then you are rewarded with some video game time. But this, like, all day long, every day, in the car, I see kids everywhere, and it's so sad to watch, like in line at Disneyland, like they can't even just sit there and think, hurry, put a phone in front of their face, give them a game, like dinner. I've seen kids at restaurants literally open up a DS and just start playing, and the parents are just like on their own phone. That is not normal. Those are going to be the photos that in the future, we're going to look back and say, what the heck? Like, how did they let this happen? Like, back in the day when people didn't have seatbelts, or the kids ride on the back seat or on top of the car, or like smoke cigarettes when they were 16 or 14. Those are those photos everyone's going to look at and say, like, what on earth were we all thinking? So moderation, everything. And also understand that Fortnite is a very, very big platform for predators to go after kids. If they have the earbuds in and they're chatting with people that you don't know, a lot of times they're people that you don't want your kids to talk to. Roblox too, just so you're aware, Roblox, a lot of parents are like, well, I didn't know Roblox could be bad. There's a lot of games where adults will set up very, very sketchy adult content type rooms. I've had parents tell me my 6-year-old daughter wandered into like a sex orgy room on a Roblox game. I had a 9-year-old lady of a 9-year-old said my son's avatar got raped on Roblox by some adult. Like, it's everything good that kids love. Just realize that bad people will find a way to get into it and ruin it if we're not being careful. So,
wow. First of all, I'm ashamed that there are psychologists actually working to manipulate these games to create more addiction. But I guess there are people that will always, use good for evil. But when there's money involved, and there is a lot of money involved, like you said, and a lot of parents don't realize that, like you said, the same dopamine hit that once your brain is used to functioning at this level, you take that away and you bring it here. Even normal life seems so boring and dull because video games are meant to go so fast. And that's what keeps their attention. And people are like, well, my kid has attention issues or doesn't really like to pay attention to anything unless he's playing video games. But that's literally rewiring their brain. And it is just so scary that this is happening to our kids. But I wanted to move on to, I remember when I first started as a psychologist, they were like, don't put magazines or Vogue or any of those fashion magazines in your waiting area, because that really messes with people's minds as far as unrealistic body images and photoshops and airbrushing. But now our little preteens and teens are competing with these perfectly curated influencers who are using these filters, and they're comparing themselves. Can you speak a little bit about that? And I know we talked about the girls, but the boys are affected as well. They have to have these pecs and 6-packs and all that. But Talk to us about what that's doing to the kids.
Before social media came out, and I talk to my wife about this sometimes and her friends, when you saw these perfect images of a beautiful person, a beautiful woman, you know, on a beach or something, like just every hair and makeup done and all this, when you saw those images, these were models and they were in magazines. And so you could process it a little easier. You'd see this photo and you're like, oh my gosh, there's this like size 00 model sitting on an elephant in Africa with her hair done. Like, how is that possible? That was in a magazine. And so, you know, or that was Giselle. That was like an actual supermodel. And so it was a little easier to process. I don't think it affected, you know, people as much because they're thumbing through Vogue and like, well, this is Vogue. I get it. Now, every 15-year-old girl is a Vogue supermodel. I've had moms say that to me a lot. They're like, where did the ugly phase go? Like, none of these kids have ugly phase. They go from like 8, 10, 9, 10, then they get a smartphone and suddenly they're all filtered up and they all look like supermodels overnight. So the issues is that a lot of kids can't, especially girls, cannot process like, is this real? They can't make the connection that this is curated, that this has all been set up. You know, she didn't just wake up and look like a 10 knockout. She got up, she did her hair and makeup. She probably took 80 different other poses and hated all of them. And then she found the perfect one. And then she went on Spring or she went on Photoshop or whatever it was, or any of those billion apps where they can change how they look and filter everything and then post that like it was just like it just suddenly magically happened. And so I always tell parents, especially because I got 3 daughters, I sit down with them and I scroll through some of these photos on Instagram and I say, hey, look at this photo. What do you think about this? Do you think that's actually real? Look how she's posed. Look how she's sitting. Look how there's no flaws. And then have these conversations, say, this isn't real. Like there's nothing about this is real. This person has assistants who do her makeup, right? Some of your friends, even in high school, that do the same thing. A lot of high school girls, you know, that's the big thing, is getting all dolled up and taking the perfect photo, and because that's what gets all the likes. And it's not their fault. They just saw us as adults doing it, so they followed suit, right? And so having conversations about what's real and what's not real, and helping your kids realize that they don't need these stupid filters. That's what I hate also about things like Snapchat and especially TikTok. TikTok has built-in filters now where they can filter to make everything change on their face. They can make their eyes bigger like a Pixar princess. They can change the shape of their nose. They can smooth things out. They can pop their cheekbones. And there's apps that are advertising to your kids on these platforms that tell them to do those things, which is really sad. I had a mom come up to me after a parent night, and she said, after I talked about Snapchat and the Snapchat filters, there's actually a term now called Snapchat dysmorphia, where kids and teenagers, if they use the filters too much, it actually triggers in their brain to like hate their own body because they want to look like their filter. I've had people at plastic surgery offices tell me that they have young women come in, 18, 19 years old, that show their, the doctor, hey, this is my Snapchat filter. Can you make me look like this, like permanently? And they're getting their cheeks lifted, or they're getting filler, or they're changing the shape of their ears. I had a mom at that parent night that was in Phoenix. She came up to me and she said, Collin, my 10-year-old daughter just came up to me the other day and she was crying. And she said, Mom, I don't feel pretty unless I use a Snapchat filter. Those were not created just for silly games. Those were created because the experts knew that if we could give people a way to change and alter how they look to look like the magazine people, that they're going to keep coming back and using our app. They're going to get a hook to it. And then that's going to make us all money. So again, just have conversations with your kids about it. If you see them doing those things, doing those behaviors where they're filtering everything and changing how they look, or you see them constantly deleting photos because they hate how they look, that's a good sign to have some good conversations with your kids.
Wow.
Thank you, Collin. That was, again, very enlightening for, I know, a lot of parents who just don't make those connections, that this can, it's not just fun and games, because that's how they draw you in, as you said, especially with Snap and some of these filters. They draw you in with the fun part of it, but they don't realize that the more you accustom to seeing yourself through that filtered lens, it's going to impact your self-image and your sense of self-worth. And also what I'm noticing too, which you've spoken on your platform about, is how widespread messages glorifying certain industries, pornography, as we know, is just ubiquitous all over, as you mentioned, social media. But also there's certain industries that are also being glorified, right? Strippers, you find them showing their presence on TikTok, on some of these platforms, glorifying their work, escort services. and again, parents might think, well, my child would never do something like that. But if you actually go through the comment section, which I know I'm certain you have as well, it is beyond alarming to see young people or just young girls who appear to be young, really seeming like they're interested. Like this is now piquing their interest. Can you speak to that issue? Because I think, again, a lot of parents have these blind spots where they're not realizing that in addition to all the toxicity that we've discussed, there are certain messages that are driving or that are being driven into our children about, insta fame as well as quick money, and those are the things that are going to convince our children maybe to compromise their morals, compromise their religious values, compromise all the things that you've raised them with. Can you speak a little bit about that and what you've seen
You bet.
on the ground?
I got a message, I think 2 weeks ago, that I shared from a mom. Again, really good family, both parents there, active. They'd go to church and they taught their kids the best they could. And her message to me was, what do you do when you find out your 16-year-old daughter has been selling nude photos on Snapchat to grown men? And I reached back out to her and she told me the story, which of course, nothing shocks me anymore. But she was just heartbroken that her amazing, perfect daughter would fall into this trap of selling photos, nude photos of herself to grown men who were hitting her up on Snapchat. I've had parents tell me they found out their daughter, 17, was selling photos of their feet to grown men through Snapchat or through TikTok. When you scroll through TikTok, and I've shared some of these, there is a big trend of sex workers showcasing all the money they make and talking up and showing off all their gifts. There's a whole big thing about being a sugar baby. That's a term that kids are being bombarded with, where guys called sugar daddies will message these girls and say, hey, I'm not looking for sex, but I just want to be a sugar. I'm looking for sugar babies where I'll give you an allowance of, $1,000 a week. And all you got to do is talk to me. Of course, they want nude photos of these kids afterwards. They're very, very manipulative. But it is so alarming. Like, I know that the world is going downhill, but how fast it is going downhill, especially because of these apps. To the point now where it is not just normalized, but if you say something to a middle school girl about sexting, or if you say something to a middle school kid about, not selling nude photos, they just start laughing about it almost. They just, say, okay, boomer, or they're like, you know what, if I want to make that money, stack that lettuce, I'm going to do it. Right. We have given kids such horrible examples through social media of what they should be. And a lot of those issues come from our culture and our media. We glorify people, no offense, like the Kardashians, who will say, what, if you want to be 100 million followers on Instagram and you want to get all these deals and be a billionaire, then this is how you have to act. This is how you have to look. You need to change how you look. You need to do the plastic surgery, show your skin. And the underlying message behind all this, I want to say, is that you have to prepare your kid for the road and not the road for your kid. As much as I try every day to change the culture of our country and change the morals of people, it's not going to work. As much as I expose this, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And so what does that do to me as a dad of 4 kids? It tells me that I have to be 10 times as more vigilant. I have to fight 10 times harder. We're throwing our kids into the hands of the porn industry and to the social media industry to teach our kids all this stuff. If I don't teach them, Pornhub's going to teach them. If I don't teach my daughter about body image, TikTok famous girls are going to teach them, or strippers on there showing all this money they make and glorifying this stuff. And so it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get worse. And instead of being afraid, it's just taught me that I have to be really, really, I have very, very courageous conversations with my daughter and with my son and with my kids and with my sister, with my daughter's friends. When her 9th grade friends come over and they pull their phones out and stuff, and we have a rule at our house: phones go in a basket if you want to come over and hang out, which they hated for the first day, but then now they love. I have conversations with them too, where I'm like, hey, what are you guys seeing on Snapchat these days? What are you guys seeing on TikTok these days? Hey, did you guys see this one that went viral? What do you guys think about that? What do you think about the new Cardi B song called WAP and the lyrics? Like, isn't that awful? Like, that's just horrible. And so I think we need to be also good villagers and realize that kids that our kids hang out with, they could be exposed from them to the stuff we don't want our kids to see. So having conversations with those parents and talking to them and making our tribe all aware of the issues out there. Because again, like I said, as much as we want to change where the world's going, it's really hard to when there's so much money involved. So a lot of courageous conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I know, Say, you had a question. Did you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, actually, well, as far as these, you mentioned the village, and I'm so glad you did that because we talk about, in the Muslim community, how important it is to, really enact or dispatch that village because we have to create it, even if it's virtual. We can't just, do this on our own. We need to look out for one another. So I've certainly made that point, and I'm glad you mentioned that. But there's a lot of parents that I feel exasperated. They're exhausted. We've gotten questions here, even on the chat, like I work full time. I don't even know how to begin. How do I do this? Especially when it's COVID right now. And then there's, threats that are external. You mentioned, 80s, 90s kids, we used to have much more freedom going out and we could just sort of, explore, go down the street, play with friends. But people have become so much more paranoid about, kids trafficking and kids getting taken that they keep them inside. And then the only options for them are, again, these platforms. So, what do you say to the parents who feel that they don't know where to begin? Because we've given a lot of information and you've been so helpful in opening our eyes to all the threats and dangers. But I think in terms of practical steps on where to start these, to really start making the changes, that's where people seem to really feel like this is too much. I don't know where to begin. So where would you say would be the most important point in terms of, would it be, and I guess I'll focus the question a little bit more for you, would it be to minimize usage and to really start creating boundaries about time, or would it be to look at really just sort of filtering and cleaning house when it comes to what our kids are on these platforms?
Yeah.
Like what would you advise would be the first starting point?
All of the above, but let's break it down into easier steps, right? So some of the things I would do that are the easiest steps to make biggest impacts. Number one, please just make sure that you have some kind of filter on the content. There's digital candy and there's digital protein. And I wouldn't have an issue if my kid was on their laptop 4 hours a day if they're learning how to play guitar on YouTube tabs, or they're, watching videos of how to rebuild the car in the garage, or, that kind of stuff I have no problem with. But you got to have some kind of filter. So there are routers out there that you can get, which will filter all the content coming into your house, so you can feel a little bit more at ease knowing that they're not going to stumble upon something as easily. We use something called Eero, EERO. Eero routers are really, really awesome. There's Disney Circle. There's a lot of options out there that can be pretty inexpensive just to filter the content, because that way you can make sure that your kids aren't going to just accidentally stumble upon something. Something I said when I spoke at the National Center on Sex Exploitation Global Summit last month, that everyone just kept sharing and tweeting and et cetera, is when I said that the internet is at a point now where 47% of the internet is pornographic, pornography sites or something to do with pornography, and that the internet is now anxious to show your kids porn. And if you don't believe me, just type in a search bar on Google or go to Instagram and type in a couple letters and see who the accounts they show. Oh, did you mean this? And they're all the ones of women in bikinis or pretty close to pornographic. The internet is anxious to show your kids stuff. So let's cut off the snake at the head and make it really hard for the internet to do what it wants to do. So filters, something like an Eero router or Disney Circle to filter the content. So if you have to go and they're going to be, they're going to be on a laptop for a couple hours, it's going to be a lot hard for them to be exposed to this stuff. Number two is look at getting a central charging station or a charging dock where all the devices at a certain time before bed, every device goes on the charging station in the off position where they stay there all night. One of the biggest issues affecting especially kids' mental health is lack of sleep. And kids need 8 to 12 hours of sleep a day. And most high school kids are getting 4 to 6 because they have their phone in their bedroom and they're staying up till 2 in the morning. Then they wake up to 6 to go to school. So get the devices out of the bedrooms, iPads, Xboxes, get the games out of the bedroom. We have something, I think I had it, which is called eHive. Now we don't have devices, but I love this. It's an actual, thing that zips open, and then it can hold like 7 iPads and smartphones, and then it shuts and then it actually locks. It has a code that parents can lock it like luggage, and then the whole thing charges at night, which I think is actually a good idea because kids are ninjas. I've had a lot of kids say, my mom takes my phone and she charges in her room, but most nights I just sneak in and take it and stay up till 1 in the morning. So get the devices out of the bedroom, look at a central charging station. And as far as reconnecting, so kids don't want to just have to go play video games, I would say just go get a board game, right? If you have a half hour, instead of saying, hey, I got a half hour, I'm going to just go, I'm tired as a mom or dad, I'm going to just go scroll Twitter or go look at Facebook. Just go get a board game and sit down with your kids and just play something. You don't have to spend a lot of time with your kids to give them the connection that they thrive, that they just want so bad. It could be 10, 12 minutes of just sitting on the ground and talking about what they like. It could be give them the aux cord and have them pick some music that you play on the speakers. It could be going on a walk. Just spend some quality time with your kids every day. It doesn't need to be all day long. Even if just a few minutes where they really feel engaged, they really feel connection. It's so fun. I actually bought like hundreds of packs of Uno. I got stacks of them. And when I travel or if I'm at restaurants, like I always take some with me. And if I ever see a family at like an airport or a restaurant and everyone's just phones down looking at their phones, I'll just walk up to them and I'll be like, hey, you guys look bored. Like, I bet mom and dad would love to play you in a game of Uno. And I'll throw them a pack and then I'll run off. And it's actually one of my favorites. Because then I turn around, the parents are like, wait, what was that? And then 5 minutes later, they're all playing Uno together. Just realize it's not as hard as you think. Your kids are going to love it. It might kick and scream at first. Don't go in, and again, don't go in guns blazing and go like, we're no more screens, right? And the last thing I want to say is get a tech contract with your kids, where you sit down and you lay out some rules that the kids buy off on too. What is okay? What is not okay, right? What are the proper hours that we can use? You can have screen time if it's this. We don't share private information. We don't, mom has all the passcodes. You're not going to delete stuff. And get your kids to buy off on that too. I tell parents, make a tech contract where they sign it and you sign it and you throw it on the fridge. And what that can do is disarm a lot of this that goes on in the homes of like, you give the phone, you take the phone, you give the phone, you take the phone, and they get mad at you. I mean, if they have agreed to the contract that I don't say this, I can't share this, I can use it only this for these reasons. And if the kid breaks that and you say, hey buddy, like your signature's right there and mine's right below yours, so what's the consequence? You're going to lose privileges for the next 2 days. You're not the bad guy anymore, right? They signed it. So those are just a few things.
Those are great suggestions. I do want to say that you mentioned we have to be the parents and we have to pull the brakes. I always say we have to be the frontal lobe for our kids, because like you said, the kids' brains don't fully develop for boys until they're 25, until they're 28, and girls until they're 25. Yep. We have to be that frontal lobe and make the decision. So let's say if they were addicted to drugs, we're not just going to just rely on the contract, right? And say, you said you're not going to do drugs, so I trust that you're not going to do it. We also have to do our part as far as limiting access. Like for me, I know that this probably sounds really harsh, but cut off that router after 9 o'clock. So that they don't have access to Wi-Fi. They're not having access to Netflix, and they're not streaming. Because like you said, I've always said this to my patients and to my own daughter. If I was a kid during this time, I would have done all of that. I would have been just as sneaky. I would have, because it's like you can't leave a kid in a candy store and say you can only have one candy. Amen. So we have to limit that access.
That's right. And there's some apps you can put on their phones. I'm a big fan of RPact and Bark, which are both like $6-7 a month, and it's worth every penny. With RPact, you can shut off everything on their phone at a certain time. You can give them a certain amount of time per app. Bark's really good at monitoring stuff. You can flag keywords. So if they're getting cyberbullied or if there's sexting going on, the parent, you can step in. But the thing with those apps and monitoring, just realize, like you said, that's not doing your job for you. That's just making your job a little easier. Don't think that putting the filters and getting the content filters and the app monitoring, and then you can just sit back and chill and it's going to do your job for you. It's not going to. It's just going to help.
Figure out how to work around it also. Like I had Custodio on my daughter's phone, and her friends taught her how to get around it, and she was able to go past 9 o'clock when she wasn't supposed to. And so I know that kids are very savvy, and we have to be vigilant, and we have to completely remove that access, because sleep is so important. And a lot of them are having a mental health issue because they're not getting enough sleep. So in the interest of time, we have, I can go on until 12 if everybody is available for that. But I want to open it up right now for questions from the audience. If you guys have questions, we can go ahead and answer your questions. So let me just go through to see what everybody saying.
And in the meantime, if I can just also make a point, one of the things that I wanted to say, Colin, I so appreciate everything you've said. Really, everything is a gem. But the what I'm picking up from you, which I really want to just drive this point home to people, is everything you've said about open communication, really having just sort of regulating our own emotions around these topics, speaks volumes about the importance of respecting teens, which I think is sometimes lost on a lot of parents. We have these authoritarian models of parenting where parents just think my word, my say, shut up, or it's just I lay the law down and you better respect it, and they don't realize that that is exactly why their peer group and these platforms are so powerful, because they're so accepting, right? It's like, we love you, we accept you for everything, and we'll never reject you, we'll never be harsh with you. And then you have the home, which is supposed to be their primary, our hope is, right, as parents, that we have the most influence over our kids. And I think a lot of parents are deluded to think that that's always going to remain, as long as I yell loud enough and I'm strict and I have those, I can threaten them, well, they'll stay in line. But I feel like it's really actually backfiring and throwing them into the arms of these things. So if you can maybe just, while Nafis is maybe putting some questions together, speak on the importance of respecting teens.
One of my favorite equations that you should all write down is that rules without relationship equal rebellion. Rules without relationship equal rebellion. So if you're just shouting rules at kids, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Why? It's because I said so. All that, and there's no real relationship that you've created where they trust you and they can come to you and they have questions and you don't shame them. Like you said, I mean, a lot of kids go to social media because they aren't being shamed. And they tell that to me. They say, I love Instagram. I mean, I hate it because it's ruined my self-worth and it's questioned my gender identity and all this stuff. But at least I don't get yelled at. No one's there. I mean, I get cyberbullied, sure, but it's not my parents shaming me. And so you have to find a happy medium between too much passive parenting and too much authoritarian parenting. And understand that kids love a very healthy middle where they have rules and they have regulations and boundaries, but there's also trust. Now, one of the biggest issues parents are missing, especially today, and I was guilty of this too, is that parents are too worried about being their kid's friend first and making sure their kids like them and making sure that they're buddies. At the expense of the kids having no regulations and having free access to everything, which is then throwing them under the bus. And so making sure that there's a healthy medium where you're not shouting rules and saying my way or the highway. And a lot of us were raised this way. My dad was that way because his dad was that way. And so a lot of this is us having to break cycles where we take the goods that we learn from our parents and then, bring in some better stuff. But understand that kids, I learned this from someone, I forgot who it was, but it really helped me out. They said, talk to your kids like you would want your boss to talk to you. That doesn't mean being friendly and laughing and just being stupid the whole time, but realizing if they mess up, like you wouldn't want your boss to come and be like, oh my gosh, you suck. Why would you do that? Go to your room, right? No one would want to hang out with someone like that. But having conversations where it's like, okay, would you want to come sit down? Let's talk about this. Okay, so can you tell me why you thought that was a good idea to burp the ABCs during class today? Like, what were you thinking there? Like, I understand you're mad that you got kicked out of school today, but let's talk, like having these thoughts. I don't want my kids I don't want to be their friend first. I need to be their parent first and their supporter and their guide and their mentor. They have friends, right? I'm still friendly. My kids love me. And I hope they do at least, but they have their friends. They need us to be their guides. The best example I ever heard of this is someone said, and we're big Disneyland fans, and of course you can't go right now, but someone gave me the example. They said, okay, when you go ride a roller coaster where you're going upside down and it's scary and you could fall, they have the harness that, you pull down. And then what happens after you pull it down? Some kid who makes $8 an hour walks by and he shakes it for a second and then he leaves, right? And the guy said, why is this person shaking that? Is he shaking it because he's hoping that it would, latch open and then show you, oh my gosh, I just saved your life. You could have died. Or is he shaking it because he wants to make sure it doesn't open? And he said, that's what parenting is today. That's what kids are. Kids are shaking you every day. And they're not shaking you so they want you to open up and they realize they could just fall to their death. They're shaking to make sure that you're not going to budge. that you're going to be firm in their world where everything is chaotic right now. I mean, these kids are like, they don't know if they're going to go to school. They have to wear a mask. Like they have to like wash their hands. It's like a crazy time. They need to know that somewhere, that safe place at home, they can be loved, they can be respected, they have rules, and that if they shake you, that's their job. And if you let go, all you're letting them know is that you can't trust me as your mom or dad to be there for you. They want to know that you're not going to go anywhere, that they're not going to eventually fall to their death. And they might kick and scream if about it. You know, well, I can't, Jimmy doesn't have rules and he can play Fortnite all weekend. And Samantha's got TikTok and she's on it all day. And I just laugh. I'm like, that's great. It's too bad you weren't born to that family where they really don't care. But sadly, we do. And we're not going to let that happen to you. But I'm so glad you said that. Like a lot of parents, I think the old authoritarian way of parenting was like, it's my way or the highway. Like you've got to be firm and set rules and don't explain why. Kids today need to know why. You have to, and until they're like after age 7, I have to tell my kids, here's why we're doing it. Here's why, what do you think? Get their buy-off on it. Because if you let the rules and there's no relationship, they're going to rebel even more.
It's not just kids today that need to know why. I used to hate just being told because you have to. I needed to know why. I needed that explanation, and that made all the difference for me. And so I made sure to do that with my child. But I think it was a rabbi that said, you need discipline and you need love. You have to have both in equal measures. You can't just have too much love and you can't have too much discipline, because like you said, it does lead to rebellion and they don't understand. And a lot of kids thrive in structured environments where parents actually show they have rules, they have expectations, and parents that just are like, well, you can do whatever you want. That actually makes kids really feel unstable inside. Yeah. So let me just, but yeah, that was a great discussion that you just had about the importance of rules and how to talk to our kids. So this is a question that came up from Reshma that says, discuss movie streaming like YouTube, Netflix, and Amazon. And we do have to put filters because there's so much inappropriate content. Like there was a full-on soft porn that was very popularized the last couple of months. Was it like 365 or something on Netflix that all the kids were watching? So can you talk about that a little bit?
So I think some of these ones like Amazon Prime has it where you can set up a parental control where they have to know a passcode to be able to access stuff. But then again, they can still see the thumbnails, which for some boys, especially at 12, that's enough to trigger them to get curious to go open up a porn site somewhere if they have access to it. I think you either chop it off completely and get rid of Netflix, or if you have it, have conversations about it. And that needs to be part of the contract you have with your kids. Hey, so we have apps, we have iPads, we have an Xbox, and we have Netflix. What are the rules and regulations around that? So what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in our home? And make that a part of your tech contract with your kids, where if they're on Netflix and if they see something that they shouldn't have seen, that they know that they can come talk to you about it and you're not going to throw the book at them. And, and they know they can have these conversations with you about it. I think it's super important just to make sure that that the devices are in areas where the kids can't hide them. No TVs in the bedroom, anymore. No iPads in the bedroom or in the bathroom, even worse. Keeping them in places where, the kids can't hide and be secretive about it. But just realize that sadly, a lot of these places like Netflix, they don't do a very good job at all of filtering this stuff. And sadly, the content now, especially on Netflix, everything pretty much is TVMA. And if it's TVMA, it's not even R-rated. It's way worse being exposed. Like you said, there was that show 365, total disaster. One of the trends on TikTok is what teenagers and young adults are doing is watching 365, reenacting some of this sexual abuse, and then posting their bruises on TikTok. And kids were being exposed to this. It's just a disaster. But YouTube is the one that a lot of people love and the kids love. Again, if the kids are watching stuff that is good and I'm around, I think that's okay. And if not, like put whatever filters YouTube has on there or parental controls. And anything beyond that, again, that's why I'm going to cut the snake off at the head with things like Eero routers or Disney Circle, where it can do a lot better job than I can at filtering the content that you can even come on apps or, sites like YouTube or things like that. But
Sophie says, my child's therapist supports his need for having access to phones and all screens at all hours of the night. I don't know what kind of therapist would be so irresponsible to say that that's okay, but if it's for safety reasons or for some trauma where they need to have their phone and so they're able to call, give them a flip phone, give them that Gabby phone where it just doesn't have any of the apps. They can have access to contacting somebody and being able to call the police if they have to. But for them to have access to phone and screens of all hours of the night, that is very, very irresponsible for any therapist. It just creates a lot of issues. But do you have anything to add to that, Jose or Collin?
I would totally echo, and I'm so glad you said that as an actual therapist. I've heard that from some parents too. They said, my therapist said that his kid, don't take their phone away, let them have access to it. And I think what they're saying is don't rip it away, because this is such a part of this kid's identity right now. It's just like a heroin needle. If they're addicted, you can't just yank it away and not expect them to crash or self-harm. There's no reason these kids need to have it in their bedroom all night long. Absolutely zero reason. The only reason I could see that is if there's no parents at home and they're connecting with parents through that, or, I really can't think of one. I really can't. And like you said, there's options. If it's just safety, like this kid has so much anxiety, they just want to be able to call or text their mom or call or text their dad, especially if they're maybe in a split home, maybe where they don't really like going to dad's house and they want to have a phone in their room where they can talk to mom. Get them a Gab phone. I'm a big fan of them. Gab phones look like smartphones, but all I can do is call and text, and they're really cheap. Or a flip phone or something like that, or a Gizmo watch if they're little and they can just talk to their parent through that. But I'm so glad. I can't think of any reason to let all hours of the night. Like, that's just going to cause way more problems.
Yeah, that is a ridiculous thing. We do have a question here about how old do you recommend for a teenager to have a gadget? I'm sure you're going to get a lot of these questions.
Here's my answer. I hear this a lot from parents. What is the appropriate age to give my kid a smartphone? And my response to that is whatever age you're okay with them to start looking at pornography. Whatever age that is the age that's the right age to give them a phone. Now, I say that laughing because I've said it so many times and parents always go, oh my gosh, what did he just say that? That's the right age. When you give your kids a smartphone, they're going to be exposed to adult content and pornography and xenophobia and homophobia and all the horrible things out there. When you give your kid a smartphone, it is not a phone. You're giving them a mini computer with access to the thoughts and expressions of 2 billion humans. What could go wrong, right? And you're giving 2 billion humans access to your kid. And so just understand, there is no appropriate age, because I don't know your kid. I have 4 kids, and I think one of my kids, I could give her a smartphone right now and she'd probably be just fine. I think she would be the one who would be tattling on everyone else, and she'd be the one exposing what they're doing wrong. What age, you know your kid the best. Some kids at 16 are pretty mature at that age. And if you are monitoring and not giving access to the really crappy apps, they're going to be just fine with this stuff with, moderate check-ins and parental controls and things like that. But for the most part, when I see little kids 9, 10, 12, 14 with smartphones and they have all those apps, I'm just shaking my head. They're going to be exposed to this stuff. No matter what you put on it. You could put Custodio, Guardian, Bark, Net Nanny, Covenant Eyes. You could put filter blocks, screen time, and kids are ninjas and they're going to find a way around it. And so, like I said, whatever age you're okay with that. Parent asked me the other day, said, what's a good age I should let my daughter get TikTok or Snap or Instagram? And I said the same thing, except I said, whatever age you're okay with your daughter to get anxiety and to start hating herself. Because that's what those apps are going to do to her. So if that's 14, you're okay with that, or 22, it's up to you.
I love that. That's perfect. But one thing I want to make sure I say is, even with the Gab phone, I was really interested in looking at that, but it does allow texting. And the first time my daughter was exposed to porn was, what were those short videos before TikTok?
Vine.
One of her friends sent her several Vine videos of very explicit sexual moves. And that was the first time at age 10 that she was exposed. And my heart broke for her, because I tried so hard to protect her against any kind of sexual predators and being molested or any of that. And here it came right on my phone, because she didn't even have a phone. Her friend sent it to her as a text. She opened it, and that just sexualized her at such a young age, and it broke my heart. So,
well, with the Gab phone, so I'm a big promoter of Gab because I love what they've done. The Gab phones don't have MMS. So they can call, text, but they can't send any data type stuff. They can't send photos. They can't send links. They can't send videos. They can't send GIFs or GIFs, or however you want to say it. They have emojis and they have text. And so we have 2 Gab phones, which use as home phones. And if my kids want to run to a friend's house or a soccer game and I just want to be able to get a hold of them, they can do that. Flip phones, just be aware, they have browsers too. I've had a lot of high school kids that told me my mom gave me a flip phone and I just went to a browser and looked at porn. Like it just took me a lot longer to type in with T9, like da 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 a da da da, you know. So that's why I really like Gab. Gab just launched. I posted on Instagram the other day. They just launched their second phone, which can do call, text. It can do group text. So for the parents who have kids like in soccer and they do group text, and there's no MMS, so they can't send and receive texts or photos, which is really nice. And the phone's like $99. If you use Collin K10, you get $10 off. But I've used Gab for 6 months and I haven't had any issues being able to. I've tried to poke every hole I could into it, and I haven't seen anything bad. So
that is awesome, because I was seriously looking into getting that phone instead of, because when I got her the flip phone, she was very embarrassed and like, I don't want to use this.
That's the thing. If it flips open, then all the kids are like, look at her. Her parents don't trust her. She's got a porn issue. You know, the Gab phone looks like an iPhone, so but it can't do anything. So that's why the kids still feel cool, but they can't get in trouble.
Yeah, my daughter is 15 and she doesn't have any social media and she doesn't even have a phone. She's been using mine. I gave her her phone for a very short amount of time and she lost it very quickly because she got caught up with the whole thing. It's like, sorry, lost privileges. But the Gab phone sounds like a much better alternative. So how do you feel about, Amna says, YouTube Kids? I know that there was a lot of issues with YouTube Kids, with porn even being there. So what do you say about that?
YouTube Kids, do not think that your kids aren't going to be exposed to stuff. In fact, this was I think it was a year and a half ago. I shared this when I do my parent nights, that the number one place toddlers were exposed to pornographic content was on YouTube Kids. So YouTube Kids says that they can filter this stuff, and they say it's only young kid stuff and they can filter it. But again, the evil people have found ways. They always do. Where they create a video that looks like Anna and Elsa having a tea party. And if you keep watching at minute 6, 7, they start doing stuff. They start, clothes come off or whatever. And then it outlinks, right? In the exit part where they can put links up, they can click it. It says, click here for more. And I've been on it before on YouTube Kids where you click on that and it goes straight to a porn site. And it's so sad that something even as big as YouTube Kids, like they found ways around. And so again, monitor if your kids are watching it, make sure it's in the kitchen, never on an iPad in the bedroom or in a place where, they're just downstairs on YouTube Kids. Absolutely not. Just be vigilant. And I had a mom at a parent night. This was in Peoria, Arizona, came up to me in tears. She said, Collin, same story. I tried everything I could to keep my kids safe. All they had was an iPad with YouTube Kids on it. That's all they had. And I worked at home, so they're on it a lot. And she said, I just found out that both boys have been streaming porn through it for the last 6 months, and now they're in therapy. And I said, how old are your boys? She said 4 and 6, which just absolutely broke my heart. And then I realized that happens to a lot of toddlers. And the other thing is the iPad games. A lot of the iPad games your kids play that are 4+, they will have ads pop up that if they click on that, it'll go to adult content. And I've screenshot a bunch of them. If you go to my Instagram account and I have 2 stories called iPads for Kids, ? Where I've actually shown screenshots of ads that popped up on a game a 4-year-old can play that's rated for 4-year-olds, where it was an anime with a very busty woman that you click on and it goes to an adult content site. And this is Apple. Apple's the bad guys in a lot of the stuff that they let this happen. But so do I like YouTube Kids? Yes. Would I let my kids just watch it without any supervision? Absolutely not.
Wow.
I have a quick follow-up question, Nafis, for that, because we're shedding so much light. I know I can tell from the comments I'm getting and also the questions that parents are sort of they've never heard this stuff before, and I think one of the things I try to also enlighten people on is that what we understood before about the dark web, where a lot of these predators were. And that's where they really still maintain, right? There's the dark net. For those of you who don't know, you should look into it. But it is basically a whole other alternative internet where a lot of these people, these evil people, exist. But we're seeing through these platforms that they're emerging and becoming more and more emboldened. And that's really what's shocking to me, is that we didn't hear about these stories maybe as often, just 5, 6, 7 years ago. But it seems to be more and more, especially in just my very minimal perusing of TikTok, I have seen so many stories where someone was exposed to something, or they've had an experience with a predator, and they're actually making a TikTok about that experience. So there's sexual abuse survivors, and there's people who have their own stories. But we're seeing, I think parents just need to understand and appreciate that the threats are not far away anymore. They're not just these a few little, weird, strange people that we have to worry about, or, they can just go on a website and check, are there predators in my neighborhood? They're actually in our homes and have, as you've been saying, access through all of these mediums. So when we're, raising the alarm, it's because it's becoming quite, just more and more common where kids are being confronted with predators, being, solicited privately, even on these, accounts where they just have maybe a small handful of followers. They find some way to get through. So I really feel like that needs to be clear for parents, that YouTube, Netflix, all of these, different mediums that we're talking about, that the dangers that maybe our generation thought were just too far away are becoming more and more, they're coming closer and closer, and they do have access. Any thoughts about that, just to kind of enlighten people on, because I've seen your content, you've talked about sexual trafficking, we've talked about pornography, but just maybe really letting people know that this is much more serious than, we're not being alarmist, and it's not conspiracy theories. These are real situations that you've dealt with, right?
Yes. A lot of times kids will message me, and one I shared a week and a half ago that really shocked a lot of people was from a 14-year-old girl who lives 20 minutes from me in a very, very nice city with very good parents. And she said that she was, talked to a guy she met on Snapchat, and he said he was her age. Turned out it wasn't, because that's what usually happens. And she made the mistake, even being raised in a good home with morals, she made the mistake of sending this guy videos and photos of herself in explicit ways because he sent to her, and blah, blah, blah. And then it came to the point where he had control of this girl's life. She said for 3 months, this was between the 3-month summer between her going from 8th to 9th grade. She said, he controlled my life. I couldn't leave my bedroom. I couldn't hang out with friends. I couldn't go out with my family because he constantly was threatening to expose me. And I was so afraid of the backlash from my parents and from my neighbors and friends of if my nudes got exposed and what I had done. She was so afraid of that she fell into this. And she said that I couldn't believe that I was being sexually abused by someone who didn't even live in my own state. And that's the problem with this stuff. And I'm not sensationalizing stuff. And we're not being, the sky is falling. This is happening, and kids are being molested and sexually assaulted and sexually exploited and sexually trafficked by people. And they don't even have to go into their room. They don't have to be in the same country. I've had kids message me that they've been sextorted or sexploited at 12, 13 by people that live in Central Africa or live in Europe or in Russia. And that's the issue with these platforms is, like you said, I'm so glad you said that they're not just silly dances. Oh, my daughter uses TikTok and it's just these funny, silly dances. To the outside world, that's what it looks like. But when we dig into it and you look, and that's what and I expose that these predators are messaging these girls on their comment section. They're saying, oh, you look so cute. Add me. Hey, follow me. Hey, add me. And I expose those. I'll show their faces and their comments and their names. And you'll see that these are not kids their age. A lot of these guys don't even find a fake photo of a kid anymore. They're just grown, creepy old men or women looking to extort them. And my worry is that if parents keep buying into this notion that this is just the way it is and it's not going to happen to my kid, or it's just silly filters, or it's just silly dances, that this is going to become more and more of a problem. My other thing I want to mention is this, and this is kind of hard to say, but parents understand that the traffickers and the exploiters and the predators on the other end, that these used to be good kids too. That a lot of these were born into good homes and with parents who cared. And now they're extorting kids on social media or on smartphones. I want to make sure that parents understand, what a heartbreaking moment would it be to see your son on the news because he had been extorting girls on Snapchat under your own roof without you even knowing, because he or she was given these tools and given access to really hardcore pornography through Pornhub and all these sites. And that they became it became so ingrained into their brain that girls are just objects and they do whatever you want them to do. And they got so addicted to pornography on smartphones that we pay for, that are in their own bedroom in our house, that they started doing this. And they became the next trafficker or the next exploiter or the next sextorter of children through these smartphones. And so again, I'm not trying to scare, but this is a real concern that we need to have. I honestly feel like we need to have a hard stop, that we need to put on all the brakes, and we need to collectively in our communities and our homes with our neighbors, with our friends' neighbors and their kids, have a hard stop and say, okay, everything has spiraled out of control to the point where like literally we've lost control of the internet and social media apps, and the smartphone companies aren't stepping in, tech companies aren't stepping yet because they make way too much money off this stuff. And instead of waiting for the government to step in and throw a Surgeon General warning or restrictions on this, which they are going to do in the next few years if we don't step in, I'm worried that if we let this happen and get bigger and bigger, that we're going to lose more control to the point where, we're going to just rip away tech completely from kids. Now, I'm not saying, and I don't want it to get to that point. I don't want to get to the point where we have to wait for the government to step in and regulate everything. But just realize it is becoming normalized. Kids are joking about the fact on apps like TikTok and Likey and Snapchat, they're posting videos of them laughing about the old, I see 12-year-old girls posting videos with a text saying, oh my gosh, old men in my DMs asking for nudes, like grow up, that's gross. And people are laughing about it. And so we have to step in now and really have some good conversations, put on the brakes as a community and our homes and say, okay, maybe this thing got too out of hand, and how do we rethink how kids get tech, what age is appropriate, what they shouldn't have access to. The sad part are the kids that were the guinea pigs, that none of us had clue what this could do. And a lot of these kids are in therapy now at 19, 20, which is really sad to see. But they're going to bounce back. I love saying that to kids too. If your kid got sextorted, or they got into the sending nudes game, or sexting, or their mental health has been affected by this stuff, it's going to be okay. There's people like Dr. Nafisa, there's experts out there that your kids can get help from. There's a lot of people out there that are thriving young adults that were victims of this stuff, that are in great relationships, that are doing well in college. This isn't none of this is a period. It's just a comma.
Perfect. And if this is an addiction, please seek help, because you're not going to be able to handle this alone. It's no different than any other drug addiction. There are counseling centers, there are therapists that are specializing in this. Seek the help that you need. And if you and for those of you that actually want to have ideas on what your kids can do besides the internet or besides being online, I have created a guide. It's called 25 Internet-Free Activities for Teens. It's available on my website, transforminganxiety.com/teens. I'm going to put the link on here. So use that guide as an idea. I mean, it's only 25 ideas, but it's just a way to get started. And what I mentioned when I started this program is how when we steal their boredom, they're not going to create, they're not going to figure out who they are, they're not going to become the people they're meant to become. So we need to give them ideas. So this guide kind of gives you some ideas to start thinking about that hopefully you can add your own to the list. And it will also give your mind and your eyes a break so that you're doing other things besides the internet. You're breaking up your day. And unfortunately, our time is running out. And so, Collin, please tell us where people can find you and follow you. And also, I know you have a podcast. We talked about that earlier, but share with us how people can reach you.
So there's if you follow my Instagram account, there's so much stuff on there. Prepare to be overwhelmed. Take it in bite-sized pieces. Don't try and watch every highlight story at once. It's just my name, which is at Collin Kartchner, COLLINKARTCHNER, at Collin Kartchner. So follow there and go through some of the stories. I always tell parents a lot, like if your daughter's begging for TikTok, go sit down with her and go to my Instagram account and go to my TikTok stories and watch them and read the stories that the kids have said, and, with your daughter. And after they've done that, your daughter will never ask for TikTok ever again. You can also go, I have a Facebook page. I share some stuff. But the Instagram's the main one. And then the podcast, which I started when COVID took over, it's just called the Collin Kartchner Podcast. It's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, it's on all the big ones. There's a lot of really good information on there. There's there's episodes where I'm interviewing psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists. There's ones where I'm just talking to a bunch of cool teenagers. There's a lot of really good ones on there. The one I just posted a week or so ago was everything about TikTok. That's the most listened to one. That one's pretty fun to listen to. Again, be ready to be shocked. So.
Yeah, we need all that
information.
I have to say, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to tell everybody, ever since I was informed about your page, Collin, I feel like, as someone who's been doing this work for a few years now, trying to do what you do in my own little bubble and get people to become more social media literate and aware, I have learned so much from you, and I really, truly thank you so much from
Oh,
the bottom of
thank
my
you.
heart, because you are on the front lines doing such important work. You're such a valuable asset to all families, all parents, and I really encourage. I've been trying to get people to follow you on all your platforms, but I want everybody watching and listening right now. This is the beginning of a conversation for our community with someone like Collin, and we really do hope to have more conversations. But in the interim, don't lose out on the amazing resource that he is. He provides real life stories. I learned about protecting young minds, I think, from
Yeah.
you, Gab phone. So you're always sharing even about other resources that are so helpful. So it's just a plethora of benefit. And if we're on social media, we should at least be following people like you, because we benefit so much from your work. So
Yeah.
you didn't ask me to do that endorsement. I just
Thank
really want people to follow you. So please make sure
you.
that that's your action item. Follow Collin after today, and Dr. Nafisa, of course, as well. She's always providing amazing resources for people to, get better, and have more mental health, and just better overall. She has health resources. There's a lot of great information she provides. So both of them, follow them, and we hope again to have more conversations with you, Collin. I really want to
Thank
see the
you.
Muslim community just take you, to flight within our community and continue to have these conversations with
I'm
you.
so
So
there. Anytime you need me, I would love to talk about it. Everything I do, I don't charge for anything. Every speech people come
awesome.
to, that's always free. Podcasts, of course, this type of stuff. And my plug, I thank you guys so much for what you're doing. I know we all feel like we're like these lone gladiators in this arena fighting every wolf and animal out there. So thank you for coming together, and thank you everyone else who made this a part of your day. I really appreciate it. If you want to send me an email, if you have any questions, it's just heycollin@savethekids.us. And let me throw in one final plug for Dr. Nafisa and for all therapists. I feel that every kid needs to get into therapy, no matter what. At 12, 13, 14, there's so much going on in this world. And a lot of us as parents, we weren't trained how to do this. And amazing people like Dr. Nafisa and therapists out there, they know how to do this. And a lot of times your kids just need someone that's not you to talk to. And not Snapchat creepers and not people on TikTok, right? I think you should always give your kid the ability to have a couple therapy sessions with someone where they can just sit down and just talk about whatever they want to talk to and see what comes out. And when they come back in the car, they'll be like, "What'd you guys talk about? Did you talk about how me and your mom are fighting? Did you talk about that? Like, what'd you talk about?" Don't ask your question. Just be like, "Hey, was that fun? I hope you had fun. Let's go get some ice cream," right? I want to take away the stigma that if your kid's in therapy, that they're broken and you messed up as a parent. That has to stop. I want it to be so normalized where kids after school are like, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to go play soccer?" "Oh no, I got to go to see my therapist Tina first." "Oh my gosh, you have Tina? I see Tina too. Let's ride together." Like, "Hey, after therapy, what do you guys want to do?" Right around middle school is when they really need it. And then again, transitioning into adulthood, like 18, 19, this is a hard time to be a kid. I had an 18-year-old on my podcast last week, which I'm going to publish either today or tomorrow. He drove out from Denver, and we talked about how that young people today, because of screens and social media, were exposed to adult things way too young. And now it's created so much anxiety and depression and things like that in these young kids, and self-harm, that we're seeing kids really take a lot of time to grow up. They're slowing down. How many of you know a 16-year-old who doesn't care to get a driver's license, or they're not even dating yet and that was like the thing we all did. Like, we stole mom's car when we were 15, and like we wanted to grow, do all this stuff. But he made a good point where he said that if we don't give kids their childhoods when they're kids, they're going to do it when they're adults. They're going to want all the things they didn't get as a kid. It's just going to slow down their ability to become good, high-functioning, successful adults when they're older. And that's why we see so many 30-year-olds living in mom's basement playing video games all day and never grew up, and so many 25, 30-year-old girls who are like not going to college yet because they're not quite ready or they're stressed out. But don't worry about therapy. All my kids are going to be in therapy no matter what, because I know who I am. They're going to need it no matter what. And don't be afraid. And there's nothing wrong with them at all. Just say, "Hey, I just want you to have a chance to go talk to someone who can just be your buddy and can chat with you and just have someone to chit chat with. And it'll do wonders. It'll be worth every penny, I promise."
Thank you. I appreciate that, because even my own child, as much as I help teenagers and young children in my office, my own child doesn't want to talk to me about some of the things. She I want encourage her to talk to people that she trusts, adults that I trust that can actually guide her in the right direction, like you said, instead of her friends on social media or at school or the pervs that are, you know, lurking out there. So giving them those tools is so important. And in therapy, there shouldn't be any stigma. But I appreciate the plug for therapy. Like you said, I am such a big proponent of eliminating that stigma. It's ridiculous that we still have so much shame about going out there and getting help for something that's so important. And you said that there are kids that are living in their parents' basement. There are relationships that are falling apart and marriages that are broken up because the husbands or the wives can't break that addiction to the internet. They're playing video games, they're constantly online, and so they don't know how to be present. So this is affecting more than just kids. This is a conversation, like Jose said, this is the start of a conversation. We need to continue to have this conversation. This is a very important discussion for us to continue to have. And please, everybody, follow Collin. You're going to learn so much just from the little bit that I've had a chance to look into your site, into your Instagram page. I've learned so much. So please, everybody, follow him. And thank you so much for making the time, both of you, for being here. And thank you, everybody that has joined us. The recording will be available on Facebook and YouTube. So please share it. And I'm going to post it on Instagram as well on my IGTV. So please make sure you share it with everybody and have this discussion and follow Collin and follow Hosai and Jedidi as well. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Collin. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, Nafis.
You too. Talk later.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.